Welcome to the 12th module of Applied Linguistics course of the UGC E-Pathshala program. This module is dedicated to a more detailed critique of behaviorism, that why philosophically or psychologically or pedagogically a theory and practice which is located in behaviorist theories are not suitable for any purpose of language, particularly language teaching. We have already referred to very briefly earlier to Chomsky's review of Skinner's verbal behavior, which was done in 1959 and was like a watershed, as I told you before. But the fundamental problem, which also we have briefly talked about earlier, is what Chomsky formulated as Plato's problem. And Plato's problem is that how come, given so little, children learn so much? I think this needs to be explained in some detail. If you think about the time that the child gets to learn a highly complex system of language, a system which is complex at a multiplicity of levels, level of phonology, now you know these words, level of morphology, level of syntax, the level of discourse, all these levels, the sort of highly interconnected network systems are so abstract and so complex that probably there is no greater wonder in the world than a 4-year-old child talking fluently in the languages that she knows by the age of 4. It may be 1 or 2 or 3. Given the amount of time, if you think about it, that of the 4 years, if you think about it, some people say, well, she has nothing to do. She has nothing else to do but to learn language. But that's not true. She has to figure out the rest of the world. For example, she has to figure out space. Can she get out the door or not? Where is the window? Where is the light? Can she get under the chair or over the chair? All these, structuring of the space is another major sort of knowledge that is being constructed by the child before she is 4 years old. In terms of those 4 years, for 2 years approximately, the child is sleeping. In fact, children sleep far more. Maybe for 2.5 years, the child is just sleeping. So she gets only 1.5 years, in the true sense of the term. And what is the nature of input in that 1.5 years? Most of the time, the kind of things that we talk about, around the children, we talk about, let's say, clothes, sarees, TV programs, cricket, jewelry, shopping, market list, or we fight on issues, maybe like say fight in the house or a divorce issue or some, some things that most of us talk about. And those things they are not direct input to children. They are hardly, there is a sea of language around children, but there is, as we discussed in the last module, none of that input can potentially become intake. And there is no evidence to suggest that that input becomes intake. So that is one aspect. So that is one sort of poverty of stimulus, as Chomsky would say, that this is an highly impoverished stimulus for the child, and you cannot explain the complexity of language acquisition in terms of that stimulus. So that's one point. Secondly, you must have also noticed that when we actually talk to children, we have a lot of affection, a lot of care, but we play around with them and we generally distort our language. We talk in that kind of language, which is not the expected output and which is actually not the output. So this is what I am saying, that language acquisition is an extremely complex process and cannot at all be explained in terms of a stimulus, response, association and its reward and or reinforcement or punishment. That is why methods like pattern practice, PP and MM, you remember, or mimicry memorization. I say, how are you? You say, how are you? How are you? How are you? I am well, I am well. This kind of language learning will lead you nowhere, and we will see towards the end of this module, the presentation, and there are many examples in your module that this is not going to work. So there is the issue of time, the complexity of language, the input is highly incomprehensible, and in spite of all this, the child constructs a highly complex grammatical system. Now, consider the complexity. Let's take some examples. And I hope we can put some examples for you on the screen, or certainly you can look at the examples in your module, in the written module. Consider, for example, the question of the subject-verb agreement in Hindi. Now, it's a mind-boggling system. The standard rule is that subject would agree with the verb. So you will say, Mohan khana khata hai, right? Sita, because it is Sita and is feminine, singular, third person, therefore you have to say khati. You understand? Ram khata hai, Sita khati. Mohan khata hai, Janaki khati, etc. It's standard. Or you can have ladke, plural, khate hain. Again the verb changes. But if you change ladke to ladkiyan, then it becomes khati hain. So you have to figure that out. That itself is very complex. But consider the following. Ladke ne gajar khai or ladki ne bhi gajar khai. You can't say ladka ne gajar khaya. No. Because ladka is masculine. No way. The subject, when it is followed by ne, and it's the past tense, a perfect tense, past perfect, then the agreement is with the object. So, Sita ne gajar khai, Mohan ne gajar khai. सीता ने सेब खाया और राम ने भी सेब खाया. So, you see the agreement is with the object. But that's not the whole story. Suppose you get a postposition both after the subject and the object in a sentence like Ram ne Mohan ko mara. Ram ne usko pita. So, there is one ne, one ko. So, the agreement is default. It will always be this past tense that agrees with veh bhaga, veh utha, that kind of agreement. Ram ne Mohan ko mara. That's all. There can be no other form. So, all these 3 or 4 major rules of subject-verb agreement, the child has to learn at such a young age. So, we must have some hypothesis that would explain the complexity of that kind of acquisition. Consider the case of yes-no questions and the negatives. I'll just give you 2 more examples. You can see many other examples in your modules. Consider the case of yes-no questions. So you say something like she's a doctor. So you make a yes-no question. Is she a doctor? Yes. Or is she a doctor? No, she is not a doctor. So I can say she is a doctor. Is she a doctor? So if I say 1, 2, I can make a rule, a child can make a rule that 1, 2 becomes 2, 1. That she is becomes is she. But that's not the story. That's not the story at all. Consider the sentence, the boy who is from Calcutta is coming today and is going to live next door to me. So there are three is. Which is will be fronted? Which is will come? The boy who is coming from Calcutta is going to live next door to me. So the boy is the boy who is coming from Calcutta going to live next door to me. That means it's only the auxiliary or is of the main clause that can be fronted, not any. Not any is. So if there are 5, there can be 5 or 15 is in one sentence, but only one is can be fronted, and a child figures it out. Child figures it out. Nobody can teach this. Teachers don't know this rule, parents don't know this rule, but still the child internalizes this rule in a very abstract and a very subconscious way. She internalizes these rules. This only leads us to the hypothesis that there must be an inbuilt blueprint of a universal grammar, which is then mapped onto specific languages. You could take how impossible it is to teach. I think these grammatical rules are impossible. I can give you hundreds of examples. Many of them are there in your module. Let us take the example for that matter at the level of sounds. At the level of sounds, generally you will see that too many consonantal sounds cannot be put together in about maybe 99% of the languages. Some languages may put 4 or 5 consonantal sounds together. But English, for example, and all the other Indian languages cannot have more than 3 consonantal sounds at the beginning of a word. So you can only have a word like street, spray, splash, screw, scratch, etc. So you must have noticed that in all these words, the first consonantal sound has to be a s. It cannot be anything else. Now that rule, a child would make a new word like, let us say, splut. That what is this? This is splut. I got a splut today home. But will never ever make a word which will say something like splut. Splut. No, never. Because he or she knows that if there are 3 consonantal sounds at the beginning of a word, the first one has to be a s and nothing else. Consider for example, the case of ambiguous sentences. How do children acquire the skill? Nobody teaches them. Consider later on, as they grow older and older, something like flying planes can be dangerous, can have two meanings, or visiting relatives can be a nuisance. Now, to figure out that the ambiguity is there because of the can be and because of the nature of flying and visiting, you can either say flying planes is dangerous, that means you are doing the act of flying planes. Flying, that means to fly planes. To fly planes is dangerous. And you can say flying planes are dangerous, where flying is acting like an adjective to planes, which is a noun, and therefore you get are. But together they can be said with can be and can have both the meanings. So you need to disambiguate such sentences. Look at the sentence, 2 sentences, very famous sentences from Chomsky. John is easy to please and John is eager to please. They look the same. John is easy to please, John is eager to please. They look identical in structure. but they are very different. John is easy to please, that means John is the object, that somebody will please John, and that thing is easy. But John is eager to please, John is the agent, John is the subject. Now, to crack such such complex problems, you cannot say that it has been acquired from a stimulus response association, because nobody gives you that kind of stimulus, nobody knows the grammar of that kind of stimulus in your environment, except linguists, who break their heads with language. They try to figure these things out. So that means there must be a universal grammar, and we have substantial evidence for that most of the languages in the world, given the fact that they will have a subject, a verb, and an object. So if you make combinations of these, you will probably get 6 different combinations, SVO, OSV, and so on. But we find that most of the languages are either verb medial or verb final. So it's plus minus V. So either you have a language like SVO, like English, Ram ate an apple, or have languages that are verb final. Ram ne seb khaya, verb comes at the end. And all Indian languages, interestingly, all Indian languages, irrespective of whether they are Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, or Tirtho-Burman, or Munda, whatever, except Khasi. There is only one exception which we are trying to crack, we don't know, has a different structure, but all the other about 1650 languages, 1650 languages, a count given by the Government of India, and they are counted in different ways. All of them have the structure of verb finality. They are SOV. And once you have a language that is SOV, then that language is most likely to have postpositions, whereas languages like SVO tend to have prepositions like English. So you say, in English you say on the table, on comes before. In Hindi you say maize par, so par comes after maize. So there are many features that all languages will have consonantal sound, all languages will have vocalic sounds, all languages will have strategies to form yes, no questions, and they are shared strategies. All languages will have WH questions, which means information questions, and there are not infinite ways of forming WH questions, there are finite ways. So language, depending on the position of the verb, they pick up one of those strategies. So Chomsky has introduced the word parameter, that what kind of parameter is the, for example, in verb you can choose whether it is verb medial or verb final. So that parameter is chosen, okay, and then rest of the things might follow. In WH there can be a parameter which says, or there can be, depending on the position of the verb, in Hindi the WH question will go, the WH word will go where the answer is, whereas in English the WH word will always come at the beginning. Who is going, where are you going, why are you eating this, etc. WH word comes at the beginning. So there are sort of many examples, many examples to show that there is a shared, universally shared, genetically transmitted blueprint that all of us have, and children come to school with that richness. That means they come ready to learn more and more languages, and we do something so silly that we cannot even sustain their present language. So I think we should rethink this whole project, and let me read this to you, what happens when you when you ignore these things and you try to teach in a behaviorist kind of fashion, so when the child says, "Want other one spoon, daddy," you mean you want the other spoon? Yes, this is on your screen. This will be on the screen. Yes, I want other one spoon. Please, daddy. Can you say the other spoon? Ah, other one spoon, the child says. Adult. Father says, say other. Child says other. Adult. Father says spoon. Spoon. Say other spoon. Other spoon. Now give me other one spoon. This is hilarious. I mean, such an effort on the part of the parents to teach other spoon, perfectly normal thing to do. We all try to do it, but the child, she is not cognitively, linguistically ready yet to follow this, PPMM method to learn other spoons. So at the end of the day, she again says, okay, other spoon, now give me other one spoon. So this is probably, the most powerful critique of behaviorist theories of language learning. And as we go on, we will see what we should then do in the classroom. Thank you.